Hello everyone, welcome back to the Student RX Network and another content of Behind the Counters episode. For today's episode, we feature Dr. Christopher Adkins, who is a community pharmacist around the area and also a member of Pizza's Not Working. Welcome, Dr. Adkins, to the show.
Thank you.
So today we're going to go through a little bit, cover some important points surrounding your pharmacy journey at first. We'll also go through a little bit of major points on today's episode about pharmacy burnout and hope to provide for those who are watching or listening some understanding what pharmacy burnout is and how to cope with it. Last but not least, we'll also be hearing a little bit about advocacy and the campaign for Pizza's Not Working and the progression so far made to ensure safe, healthy conditions in pharmacy workplace. Without further ado, let's get this started. So, Dr. Adkins, would you like to describe a little bit of your pharmacy journey so far?
Yeah, so far I went to pharmacy school in Tennessee, and then afterwards I moved out to California, originally in Northern California, to work for the CVS's inside of Target. And I was up there for about 9 months, and my area that I floated to included everywhere from Santa Rosa all the way down to about Mountain View. And then I worked a little bit in the East Bay, and I went almost to Sacramento also, so Woodland, like right outside of Sacramento. And then I came down to Ventura County, where I've been working for Vaughn's for the last 2.5-ish years as a floater pharmacist. So I go all the way from Montecito out to Thousand Oaks, so like 9 or 10-ish pharmacies. Okay. So I've been working in community pharmacy the entire time that I've been a pharmacist.
So around how long is that? So
It's about 3 years. I think I'm coming up on 3 years now.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything in particular during your pharmacy school experience, like you say, or is there any reasons why you went to pharmacy school in the first place?
Well, funny enough, I actually took a aptitude test, like one of those tests that tells you what you should do. And 3 things came up. It was mechanic, which I actually wanted to be a mechanic at the time just because I liked cars and engineering and stuff like that. And that's when I found out that mechanics hardly make any money. So I was like, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And then the other one was anesthesiologist. And I was like, that sounds interesting because I love science. But then I realized how long it takes to be an anesthesiologist. And I think at this point, I would still be in residency to be an anesthesiologist at this point. So it was a long time investment. And I kind of wanted to get started with my life before that. And the third one was pharmacy, which I hadn't looked into before that. So I kind of started looking into that more. And I was like, oh, it's actually more heavily science-based, which was right up my alley. It's less time in school. And it seemed like a pretty cool job. I still get to deal with like chemicals and stuff like that, a lot of science-based stuff, and I think that it'd be something that I like because I get to kind of engage with people and help them with their health. Because I do like to do like physically active things, and I like to do like some personal training with people, like kind of helping them out, like eat better, be healthier. So pharmacy actually seemed like it just kind of lined up for me.
Yeah, that's definitely great. I think that's why a lot of people right now who are going to pharmacy school find some sort of relativity. It's like, I want to help people. I want to be out there, like using my science-based knowledge or healthcare knowledge to help those who are in need. Funny enough, I actually just volunteered yesterday in like a elderly living place, right? And they're struggling to know how to use their Lancets.
Right.
So it was an interesting experience because like even I got to learn more about them and like their use of their medications. And I think that's also like reminds me why I wanted to do pharmacy in the first place. Yeah. And I'm sure you have some sort of relatable experience, like maybe during your rotations or in pharmacy school, right?
Yeah, we've had a couple things where we do things like that, and we learn it in pharmacy school, but we don't get to apply it that much until like later on. So that's really what I liked was later on when we were actually applying the things. I guess because I like that, like the mechanic stuff where you're actually doing things. So I really enjoyed the latter part of pharmacy school where we taught people how to use Lancets, and we actually went to a couple nursing homes and kind of addressed like medications, and because once you get older, you have a lot of medications usually. So kind of just going over with them like which medications you need to be on, maybe keeping like an accurate med list. And I felt like I was really engaging them one-on-one and like actually being a part of their healthcare journey or their health journey and really helping them. I don't think you'd find a pharmacist really that wouldn't say that they want to help people. I think that's a very key characteristic of pharmacists and healthcare in general. We all want to help people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So speaking about you having like around 3 years of retail pharmacy experience, right? I think at what point of your career did you realize that pharmacy burnout was a real thing?
I think the first point that I started to get burnt out, I didn't really realize it was burnout at the time. I didn't realize that until I actually got into pharmacy and started working and people started saying that word. Yeah. But I actually think I got burnt out in pharmacy school because it is a very intense program.
Yeah.
It's a lot of schooling, and the school that I went to was an accelerated program too. So it was 3 years instead of 4. So it's basically 4 years packed down into 3. So there were barely any breaks, and it was just long hours, lots of studying. So I started to get I think everyone in our class actually started to get burnt out towards the end. And like I said, I liked the part where I actually helped people, but I felt like I wasn't doing that a lot. And the further along I got in pharmacy school, like the more pharmacists I talked to, especially in the community setting, which I had a lot of rotations in, it started to seem like they felt the same way. Like they felt like they weren't really having the impact that they wanted to, or that they thought they were going to have whenever they were in school or earlier on in their careers
Yeah.
for some of the 40, 50-year-old pharmacists.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, I think, another relatable point where, like, it's when you talk to different pharmacists out there who, especially practice in community settings, you can observe those. Maybe sometimes they're just there to, like, maybe, okay, they might be helping to patients with dealing with insurance or something like that, but maybe sometimes some pharmacists might want more clinical side of things, like helping patients, like counseling patients how to use their medications, or like doing things that may be helpful to them, like to their health and overall, instead of maybe sometimes dealing with a bunch of PA calls and stuff, you know?
Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, that is what I wanted to deal with. And that's what I thought I would be doing. Like, I really thought I would be doing a lot of counseling with patients,
Yeah.
because that's what we're taught in pharmacy school is like counseling, all the counseling points, all the very intricate parts of clinical pharmacy. But then when you get into a retail, especially a chain retail job, the independent pharmacies I worked at, there's actually a lot more one-on-one contact. But when you get into the chain setting, especially the larger chains like CVS or Walgreens, that kind of gets taken out, and it's more like you need to meet these quotas. Like, we need to sell this much of this, and you need to get that done and stop wasting your time doing, this what they consider to be, not profitable things, but things that pharmacists are taught to do. So we're kind of at a juxtaposition as pharmacists. And I started to hear about something other than burnout, which is called moral injury. I heard a couple of doctors talk about this, where you basically feel like you are kind of committing a moral sin almost. Like, you don't feel like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but you kind of have to, which is definitely how I feel in the pharmacy. I can't say that all pharmacists relate, but I definitely feel like I'm not doing what I should as a pharmacist. I'm not living up to my oath as a pharmacist to take people's healthcare seriously and to hold all other pharmacists and myself to the highest standard of pharmacy. So I think it's burnout physically and mentally, but it's also moral injury, that we're kind of not allowed to be pharmacists a little bit.
Okay, I think that's a very, very important point. You know, speaking about pharmacists, their role as a healthcare provider, are you recognized as a provider? How much, if, in some states or in like other states, in some states they do, in some states they don't. And just by that definition, right, how does that like impact on like, how pharmacists can practice within their own settings?
Right, because there are, you're right, there are some varying degrees of providership, and most state pharmacy organizations and pharmacists are fighting to get more provider rights. And in California, you actually can be an advanced practice pharmacist.
Yeah.
So you can provide some type of services, and there was actually a law that was introduced this year that I don't think a lot of people know about. I don't remember the exact law number at this point, but it allows advanced practice pharmacists to actually make medication changes and to prescribe medications with basically full authority. The only stipulation is that they can't be the primary care provider. So basically, they wouldn't be able to diagnose a condition. They would be able to change a medication. Say a doctor diagnoses you with something, and you go to the pharmacy and pick it up, and the pharmacist says, oh, well, actually, you have this medication interaction, so I'm going to change it to this, and then they just have to call the doctor within 24 hours and tell them, which it hasn't really been implemented largely because we have to get reimbursement from insurance companies, which do not want to reimburse anyone, especially anyone that they don't legally have to. So we're kind of fighting with getting the reimbursement from insurance companies and also getting it out there, because a lot of times doctors feel like their feet are being stepped on when someone else is making medication changes, which I agree with 100%. Like, I wouldn't want people just making medication changes to my patients. But a lot of doctors I spoke to, like when I call them for a medication change, they're like, oh, thanks for catching that. So it's kind of in a gray area right now. Even though it is legal to do it, we can't get reimbursed, and there's still going to be kind of a little bit of a wall there with other healthcare providers as far as us getting into prescribing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, especially when you mentioned about like the part where like how pharmacists can reimburse with their work, right? With their, let's just say, their vaccination provider. That's a really great process right now with COVID coming in. And also all these potential things that like pharmacists can do, have the clinical knowledge to do, but like they aren't again, reimbursed with it. They're not getting any. Well, they want to help patients as much as possible, and just by getting reimbursed, I think it will definitely encourage more people and pharmacists out there to have those interactions,
Absolutely,
and to hopefully help their patients.
Yeah, I think it would open up a lot of healthcare access to patients because with COVID-19, a lot of people left multiple pharmacists or multiple healthcare professions. I think I looked at one study, and pharmacists and pharmacy technicians were the number 1 and number 2 groups that left healthcare, and I think it was at about 40% respectively, and then nurses right after that, and then doctors right after that. So during COVID, we had a mass exodus, basically, of healthcare providers, and we're also having less people going into pharmacy school, into medical professions in general, medical schools and nursing schools. So we have less people coming in and more people leaving. So we're losing a lot of healthcare providers, and it is largely because of all the red tape that goes into healthcare in this country, for one thing, the high cost of education in this country, because it is a huge time and financial investment to be basically any kind of healthcare provider, especially doctors and pharmacists. So you really have to take that into consideration also when you're going into pharmacy school. And then also just with the massive workload that we have now and the quotas and the metrics that the retail that the corporate setting puts on us, the moral injury, the burnout. So it's all just kind of compounded. And I think COVID-19 was really just the straw that broke the camel's back, because these are issues that have been bubbling up for the last 10 or 15 years or so. And then COVID-19 came in and just wiped everything out, basically.
Just imagine like having less healthcare provided during a pandemic.
The worst time.
Just one more little thing that I want to cover. You talk about quotas. I know that recently California passed a bill to eliminate quota as much as possible. How have you seen that been exactly implemented in a community pharmacy? Because technically that's the law right now.
Yeah, it is a law. So it's starting to roll out. With any law, it takes a long time for it to really go into effect, even after it technically goes into effect. Because cases have to be had, precedents have to be set. So I don't think that any cases have actually been decided on yet. I know there are several coming up midway through this year that will start going to the district attorney. And I know several different chains like mine, Walmart for sure, and I think Walgreens. I spoke to some pharmacists there that have made reports and have been contacted to basically testify against their employers for the quotas that have been set. So it is starting to take effect, but it's taking a long time. And there have been some minor changes in the retail pharmacy. It seems like the corporations are definitely trying to hold on to quotas and metrics as much as they can, because they kind of see the pharmacy world as a transactional business. We're treated almost as cashiers a lot of the time, or sales representatives. So they don't really see the clinical aspect of our job, because honestly, like, I work for a grocery store. So they don't really know anything about pharmacy. They're like, pharmacy is a department. So I'm basically equivalent to floral or bakery. They just see numbers coming in and out. They're not really pharmacists at the highest level. They want us in there to get people to come into the grocery store. Like, oh, it's very convenient that I can pick up my medicine and get my groceries at the same time. And the same thing with CVS and Walgreens too. They are pharmacies, but they're also convenience stores. Like, you go into CVS to get batteries and card,
anything,
anything, ice
honestly,
cream. So it's kind of a strange thing, because I've gone to other countries and pharmacies aren't like that. Like, if you tell somebody in another country, like, oh yeah, I go get my medicine at a grocery store, they'll just look at you like, what? Like, why? Like, it's kind of crazy when you leave the country, because here we're just so, we're so used to that, just going in there being a pharmacy and convenience stores on every corner, whatever. It's very different in other places, and that's something that's just kind of been ingrained in our healthcare system at this point. And I would like to see it kind of move away from that, because we are much more clinical healthcare providers than we're being allowed to be at this point by the current corporate setting. I will say that the board is really helping us out and trying to move that forward, and also other pharmacy organizations like CPHA and let's see, I get the acronyms.
CHSP.
Yes, CHSP, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Yes, they're really trying to help move the providership forward and move us into that clinical aspect, if you want to be. I mean, we do still need retail pharmacists, so people are still going to have to do that. But they are trying to make that clinical setting be more popular. But I don't think that people really recognize pharmacists as clinical providers, like, because they see us in the grocery store. They come and ask me where the toothpaste is. Like, you don't go to your doctor and ask them where to get toothpaste. So it's just, I think it's going to take a big cultural shift before we fully get recognized as providers. Even if we legally are, we have to be recognized visually by the population that we're healthcare providers. We're not just, someone in a convenience store or someone in a grocery store. A lot of people don't even know that we're doctors. Like, I'll have it on my name tag, like Dr. Adkins. They're like, you're a doctor? I'm like, yes, I paid a lot of money and spent a lot of
Doctor
time
of
to be
pharmacy,
a doctor.
let's
Doctor of
go.
pharmacy, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for the
Yeah.
responses. Okay. Actually, going back to burnout, right? How did you cope with pharmacy burnout? Any tips for the audience who might be experiencing that?
So I will say for the audience at first, I did a very poor job of coping with burnout. I had no strategy whatsoever. I just decided that I was going to work as hard as I could for as long as I could, and I got burnt out. So I will say do not do that from personal experience. And I think the best thing to do is ask for help and try to do it kind of preemptively instead of doing it retroactively. That's what I did, was I didn't ask for help until I was very far down the rabbit hole. Like I said, it started in pharmacy school and I didn't even recognize it. So I would say probably most pharmacy students towards the end of pharmacy school probably, not, I won't say that you are, but probably are experiencing some level of burnout just because you're spending so much time for 3 or 4 years straight just studying, just in the books, having no social life, having no time to see your family or anything like that, especially if your family's not in the place where you're going to pharmacy school. I think I came home like 2 or 3 times in 3 years. Like, it was, I hardly ever saw anyone. The only people I saw were the people in my class, and I honestly started to get sick of a lot of them. But that's what I would say basically, is to kind of try to head it off and ask for help as soon as you feel like you need it. I actually started seeing a therapist a couple times, just kind of talk about some of my problems. I went and saw a chiropractor also because I started to develop some back problems, because you do stand up for 10 to 12 hours straight. So you do start to develop like a lot of physical fatigue. And I know standing up doesn't sound like a lot to somebody. Try standing up for 12 hours straight and tell me that your back doesn't hurt anybody. I started putting ice packs in the back of my waistband whenever I was at work. Like, it was just ungodly. And we don't really get to sit down because we have to be standing up at the computer. We have to move to counseling. We have to go give a vaccine. So we're always on our feet. And I can just remember some really busy shifts where I would go to give a vaccine, and I would give the vaccine, and they would leave, like, all right, have a good day. And I would just hide in that room and sit down for a little while, like just like relax, like, oh. And then I get like 10 seconds, and then I back up, and I'm back at it. Yeah. So get help as soon as you can. For if you feel like you're experiencing mental fatigue, definitely see a therapist at the very least. If you feel like you're experiencing some anxiety or depression, which I definitely had, go see maybe a psychologist or something like that. Try to head that off as best you can so that it doesn't develop into something worse. And if you are having physical issues, consider seeing a physical therapist, a chiropractor, something like that to address the physical issues that you're having. And also ask for work accommodations. Like, I never asked for a chair for several months. And then I finally got one. I was like, oh, this is so much better. I finally have a chair. But I went to another pharmacy and there was no chair there or anything like that.
Okay.
So asking for help. And also, I think probably one key thing that can help out a lot of pharmacists is a word that we're not very familiar with, and it's no. It's okay to say no.
Okay.
It's okay to say, I do not have time to do that. I have other tasks. It's okay to say, I feel like doing this would distract me from providing a safe workplace and safe medication practices for my patients. It's okay to say no. And a lot of pharmacists will not say no. They'll just continue to pile things on and just never ask for help. So saying no and asking for help, those are definitely my two biggest tips.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Moving on to your experience with pizzas not working. Again, actually, first define what is pizzas not working.
So pizza is not working for those that aren't familiar with the pharmacy world. Like I said, we've kind of been treated like glorified sales reps, basically, by mostly the large chains, definitely not everyone. But they thought that a good way to recognize how good of a job we're doing is to throw pizza parties for us, like we're 12 years old and did good on a math test.
Yeah.
So we found that kind of insulting. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say no to free food. I still eat the pizza.
Yeah.
I love pizza. I have no problem with pizza.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that they thought that that's how they're going to answer these just systemic, burning, physical, mental, emotional burnout issues that are going on in the pharmacy. They thought it could be solved with pizza, and it absolutely cannot. So the hashtag pizza is not working is basically trying to tell these corporations what you're doing to address these problems is not working. Giving us pizza is not working. Pulling PR stunts to say that we're hiring more people when you're really not, or you are, but people are quitting just as quickly as you're hiring them, it's not working. There needs to be real accountability taken, I think, by some of the corporations, and real responses being had by the corporations, meaning more safety, or more pharmacists, more technicians in the pharmacy, more overlap, breaks, maybe changing the pharmacy hours at some pharmacies, some more safety in the pharmacies also, because I mean, we are selling, dangerous and addictive substances, and pharmacy robbery is not an uncommon thing. I've been robbed in the 3 years that I've been a pharmacist, and there's 2 other pharmacies in my district in Northern California that were robbed while I was there. So you do have to take into account that while we're doing all this job, while we're doing all these things at our job, we also have the imminent threat of being robbed at gunpoint possibly. So it's just another thing that you have to think about, and it can't be addressed by pizza. So that's what it means basically. Pizza is not working, as pharmacists have finally had enough, and we want to see some changes, and we are demanding that changes be had now. So that's what the movement is about, to me anyway. It could be different to everybody, but I think in general that would be safe to say.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, how do you get the chance to be involved in it, and like how do you think that helped the movement help the pharmacists and other or even other pharmacy staffs out there in terms of their working environment?
Yeah, so I'm honestly not 100% sure how I got involved at first. I'm pretty sure that I just saw the email link somewhere, and I was just, fed up by what was going on at work, what I was seeing every day, the mental, physical burnout, the moral injury that I was experiencing, and I was just fed up with it, and I sent them an email, and I was like, hey, I want to be involved. I want to, whatever there is to do, let me do it. And honestly, I was kind of scared at first because nobody's going to want to hire somebody that's, making waves like that. So I was a little worried at first.
Yeah, retaliation,
Yeah,
right?
retaliation, exactly. Yeah, I didn't want to be retaliated against and basically blacklisted from working anywhere because that's my livelihood. That's how I make money. And so I was worried at first, but once I got in and started working with them, I did some stuff anonymously first. Like I made anonymous comments at the board meeting. And then once I saw how receptive they were, and honestly, also how bad off the pharmacies were, like they don't have enough people to keep pharmacies open. So really, they can't afford to fire me. I mean, I'm doing my job safely. I'm doing my job well. I'm doing my job legally. If anything, they're committing crimes like breaking the quota law. So they have no right really to fire me. So I did feel scared at first, and I was worried about retaliation. But it got to a certain point where I didn't feel like I had the right to be scared anymore because I saw what was happening to other people, and they weren't standing up for it. And I was just thinking, okay, somebody has to take a stand. And I thought that if I do that, then maybe someone else will say, oh, he's doing it. Maybe I'll do it too. And then someone else would say, okay, I'll do it. So I kind of wanted to just start a snowball effect and hopefully keep my job at the end of it.
Yeah.
So that's really how I got involved. And then what was the second part of the question? Sorry.
Oh, it was how do you think those advocacy changes have made a difference in currently for pharmacists and other pharmacy staffs out there?
So I would say I think the biggest impact that we've had so far in California anyway is a new assembly bill that just got started. There was a new subcommittee of the Board of Pharmacy that was started called the Med Error Reduction Subcommittee, I believe. I might be saying that wrong, but it was something to do with med errors. Basically, they saw an increase in med errors that was happening in pharmacies because there were less pharmacies. We were being, under a lot of stress during COVID, so more medication errors were happening. And that's what happens when you don't have enough staff and we don't have breaks and things like that. So the Board of Pharmacy was trying to get to the bottom of it, basically. And they did a few studies and had a couple of public comment sections where pharmacists like myself and a few others from Pizza Is Not Working and not from Pizza Is Not Working, just regular pharmacists that were also fed up with it and wanted to do something, came and commented on what was really going on in pharmacies and what it's really like in the pharmacies. So once that subcommittee had kind of concluded to a certain part, they made a recommendation to get a bill started, and I believe it's Assembly Bill 1286, but it's something like the Med Error Reduction Act, and that is currently trying to get passed. So it's seeking to do a couple things, which I wrote down, if you don't mind me reading it all.
Yeah,
go
ahead.
Because it was a couple things, so I want to make sure that I say it right. Let's see. So one of the big things they want to do is expand the technician's ability to give vaccines and do things like that, more clinical services. Which some people are worried about because it takes another technician away from what you're doing. But it does have a stipulation that you have more technicians there. So you have to have a second technician to do it. And then another part is to, ensure that medication errors are being reported to a third party. So right now there's no requirement for pharmacy entities like CVS or Walgreens or any pharmacy to report medication errors to anyone except themselves, except for internally, basically, unless it basically causes a death or something like that, so like something severe. So they're trying to get a third party to come in and also put a part in the reporting system that asks what the working conditions were like at that point. So like were you properly
that's
staffed?
interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Were you properly staffed? Were you understaffed? Were you giving out 100 vaccines? Were you all by yourself? Did you have a technician? Things like that. And actually, while we were talking about that in one of the meetings, every pharmacist that was on there was like, yes, let's do it. We absolutely need that. We need to show this. And there were 2 pharmacists that were on the call that were not necessarily opposed to it, but did want to kind of slow it down, like say, we need a different entity. Like they were kind of just trying to do something to slow it down. And they said their names at the beginning, so I looked them up, and they worked for Albertsons and Walgreens. They had never practiced in California before. Their job title was basically something to the degree of like a legislative lobbyist. So their job is to go around to different boards of pharmacy and make sure that laws like this don't come into effect, which is honestly a little sad to see that pharmacists are doing that. And I'm sure they've given themselves some kind of, moral justification to do it. But it is really sad that the only people that were against that were corporate pharmacists, and everyone else was absolutely for it. So that's very telling also. And then another part was to establish some sort of minimum staffing requirement, which I think would be huge for pharmacies. And then also a big part that I saw was to give pharmacists the authority to shut down a pharmacy if they saw unsafe working conditions. So
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, thank you. So a lot of people don't realize that we don't have a whole lot of authority in retail pharmacy. If I want to close the pharmacy, I have to call my boss, who has to call her boss, who's going to say no, to call her back, to call me back, to tell me I can't close the pharmacy. Like when I was working at CVS in the Bay Area, probably a couple weeks after I got hired, we had the fires up in Santa Rosa. I don't know, you might have heard about them. It was like 3 years ago, those fires, So, and I have asthma. So I started having really bad asthma symptoms, and I had no inhaler because I had just moved to California.
Yeah.
And I was literally, like wheezing, could barely breathe. And I called my district leader and told him like, hey, I can barely breathe. I can't go into work. So he told me I still had to go into work, and I had to just wait there until another pharmacy could come in and relieve me. So I sat there for 2 hours staring at a box of albuterol in case I needed to just take it off the shelf and use it, just sweating, breathing. And then after that, someone finally showed up, and I was like, okay, I'm gone. So then I went to an urgent care. And I don't know if anybody remembers this, but at the time when COVID was going on, if you had any kind of breathing issues, it was like, you have COVID, don't come in here.
Yeah.
So I had to lie to get into an urgent care to get an albuterol prescribed. It took about 5 hours altogether of me just almost dying.
Yeah, speaking about healthcare access, right?
Exactly. Yeah, healthcare access.
When the albuterol is right in front of you.
Yeah, it's right in front of me, but I can't have it. Yeah. So that was one of the main issues. I should have just closed the pharmacy. I should have just not showed up to work that day. I don't know why I went in. Was because I hadn't learned no at that point. That's exactly why I went in. But we don't have the authority to do that. Like after I got robbed, I literally had to call my boss to ask for permission to close the pharmacy. So like we don't have hardly any authority, and that was something that I really tried to drive home to the Board of Pharmacy at the time. And I said something to the effect of, there's the manager of a store is usually called the pharmacist in charge. It's an official position. You have all legal liability in the pharmacy. So I said, really, in retail pharmacy, there is no pharmacist in charge. You're just the pharmacist in liability. Because you're not really in charge of anything. You're just liable for everything. So I'm glad that stipulation is in there. And if anything gets passed, I want that to get passed to give the real authority that we should legally have in the pharmacy as pharmacists and pharmacy managers to do those things that has been, not illegally because it's not against the law, but I would say at least unethically and immorally taken away from us by the corporations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Couldn't agree more. Thank you for covering all those.
Yeah.
So to conclude the episode today, Dr. Adkins, anything for the audience? Or do you have any comments or questions for us? Or anything just in general?
I think what I have to say to the audience is if you are a pharmacist, like I said, if you're experiencing burnout or moral injury, anything like that, make sure that you get help as early on as you can and start setting boundaries at work. And then to the layperson, non-pharmacy workers, if you see a pharmacist and they're struggling, please be considerate of what's going on in pharmacy, and even nurses, doctors, anyone else in the healthcare system. We're all really struggling at this point, and we're doing the best that we can to help you. But like I've said throughout the episode, a lot of the time our hands are tied by corporate entities or regulations that we are also in our off time trying to fight against. So we're doing everything in our power to help protect you and do our job, and like I said at the beginning, help somebody. That's what we really want to do. So if you see someone that looks like they're struggling or they're having a bad day, maybe give them a hug or something or a handshake, or just be nice to them. Like literally any kind of kindness whenever you're having a bad day goes a long way. And hopefully we do get a lot changed in the pharmacy world. I know pharmacists are really pushing for it. So I hope things will get changed in the near future. And if you are a pharmacist that wants to help out with Pizza Is Not Working, you can email us at pizzaisnotworkingca@gmail.com. That goes directly to the leader of the California chapter of Pizza Is Not Working. There are different state institutes, state organizations. If you want to work on your own state organization too, you can also email them, and we'll try to connect you with someone in that state.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I think just a thank you from receiving a prescription from whoever the pharmacy staff is, I think it's more than enough.
Yeah.
Just something that simple, I think that will be really appreciated by the ones who are working in there relentlessly for your medications to ensure that you're getting the right medication as well.
Absolutely.
So, again, thank you for coming to the show for an in-person shoot. Dr. Adkins, to our viewers, hit the like if you enjoyed it, comment, and share this video or share this podcast to for those who might be affected by burnout or things that you just want to share out. Go click a follow to our Instagram and show us your support. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.